All right, hot topic, one that we've been waiting for quite some time. United States Soccer Federation and the Next Gen College Soccer Committee released their white paper of recommendations of how to modernize and evolve the American college soccer system. And one of the big standouts, the calendar, but there was quite a lot to chew through in here. We've been waiting for a while, and there's quite a lot to look at.
Yeah, look, the big takeaway. This is, I don't know, there's 15 pages or something. It's not a crazy read. If you want to go read it yourself, please, take the time to do that. If you care about American soccer and college soccer, it's at ussoccer.com/college soccer. It's very simple, the URL to read it yourself. It's been, it's also been, it's been parsed by people like Henry Bushnell over at the Athletic, and you're going to see various opinions on it kind of popping up in various social media places. There are, as you said, a couple of takeaways, big pullouts. One of them is the calendar. Right now, the college soccer calendar runs from August to December. That's it. That's all they do. August to December, they play some soccer. They race to getting enough games in so they can say, all right, you're a conference champion or you qualify for the tournament. And then they rush to the College Cup and boom, we're done. And obviously, December is not a great time to be playing that stuff anyway. Major League Soccer deals with that sometimes, but it's a thing for college soccer as well, Rob. So a different kind of idea on a calendar, which would be basically start at the same time, but take a big break, December and January. You see it there. No, basically, towards the end of the season, or to the middle of the season, rather, a big break, and then come back and finish out as you hit that second semester.
Yeah, I think that, it's always seemed weird to me the more you dig into how the mechanisms of soccer work in America and the development pathway for most of youth soccer and the club scene funnels the majority of players towards the college soccer careers. And, it's all this work is a culmination is just jammed into, a 2-3 month session, which is not by any means the ideal format to play. And especially if this is supposed to be your pinnacle of your career, if you're a youth soccer player, or the launch pad to professionalism, which, a crammed 2-3 month season never really seemed ideal. And it is nice to see that that's acknowledged, because that wasn't always the case, of acknowledging that college soccer wasn't perfect as is. And the other takeaway, you've put it on screen already, outside of the calendar change, they're also proposing a regionalization of the seasons. And so they, in some sort of a calculation, get like tiered teams from those similar regions to play the majority of the games against each other, because conferences in college in the modern world are not geolocated, really. They're scattered across the country. So they're in an effort to try to enhance or reduce travel, enhance the games that they do play against worthwhile opponents. So trying to get the cake and eat it too, kind of thread the needle between keeping competitive matchups, but also not overextending schools to travel all across the country, because they are students as well, because a lot of classes and this and that and the other, but regionalization part of this.
One of the very first bullet points is that this is about students, right? That this should be a thing that centers the idea that these are students. Now, we do live in this world now because of the House decision, and because of NIL and all these things that have changed the way college sports work, where the idea of being a student is kind of secondary. It was before. Now it's very clearly secondary if you play a revenue sport. So that's football, basketball in a lot of places. That's pretty much the list, by the way. That's it. And that's why those conferences that you mentioned are the way they are. Realignment is constantly happening and has happened, and has put teams in California in a conference with teams in Florida, because the idea is to maximize revenue for those sports like football and basketball. That leaves sports like soccer on the sideline in a very difficult position. Now, this is going to be something that, let's just make it clear. These are recommendations. These are not, the idea isn't, hey, this is already happening, let's go ahead and do this. This is U.S. Soccer saying, as the governing body of the sport in the United States of America, we should have some sort of role in making the college game, which is such an important part of the game's history here, but also this sort of untapped resource for developing players at a higher level. Like it already does a little bit, because it's just there and it's a place for kids to play. Rob, as you said, but it could be much more. And I don't think U.S. Soccer is coming at this as, well, we want to get world-class players out of college soccer. They're just coming at this like, this is a thing. It's part of our culture. We're a soccer organization. We want kids to play soccer. We want kids to have opportunities to go to college and play soccer. Let's get involved. The regionalization thing is a great idea, but it's that thing about, will the schools be on board with this? Will the NCAA be on board with this potentially? Because it does impact how those conferences work. Some of which are traditional for some of the smaller schools, and some of which are not.
But those traditions are fading each and every year. The matchups that they play between certain teams, and if you look in the finer print of this, they do allow, there's like a couple games outside of the region that they're like elective games. So they do have provisions. So if like there's like a Michigan State or some sort of heated rivalry between schools, they can still have the flexibility under this recommendation to put those schools on their calendar.
Well, so it's interesting. This graphic that's on the screen from the white paper, which again is mostly about the regionalization of schools, so that you can play, as you said, less travel, less stress on not just student athletes, but budgets as well. This is also nominally a pro rel kind of idea, right? The idea is, again, you can see it there. It says 9 teams to be determined, 9 teams to be determined. Those are supposed to sort of be the top level of teams in that general region. And then below that, you would have local leagues, which would be schools that are a little bit less competitive. So the most competitive teams, the best teams, the best schools would be in that top level. And then you would have a second tier. And presumably you could move between them. What that criteria is, I don't think that's 100% clear, but you obviously want to play the best if you are the best, and this gives that a better shot at that, rather than sort of having to make up your schedule, especially out of conference.
Yeah, and if we know anything about the leadership in, American soccer in general, and especially in college sports, having them change things is difficult, and having them have some sort of admission that they are on a lower tier than anyone else is very difficult. So getting schools to voluntarily go into the more regionalized localized tier, that might take a lot of PR work and massaging to get large amounts of people that all have their own fiefdoms to agree to these things. So we should be a reminder that this is all just recommendations, and whether this is applied or not is a whole nother story.
Yes, that's the thing, right? There's a gap between this paper coming out and any of this stuff being enacted. But I definitely think it's important to say that U.S. soccer is doing something necessary. Now, I've seen some people question the makeup of the committee, right? A former CEO of Deloitte was the leading figure, the chairman of this committee. That's going to bother some people. Did Deloitte involved in this? I don't like that. But it is, you do have to go somewhere for this. You do have to go somewhere for the expertise and the willingness to be involved in this, or to push for this. Some other things that are interesting here is, one, that last one, I'll put it back up. This is about pro league contracts. Over the last 5 years, the number of U19 men's and women's players signing pro league contracts across all pro league divisions has consistently risen. You can see the graph there. And then, so this is saying that younger players are signing pro contracts, which is obviously going to have a dramatic impact on college soccer. Now, some of that is in evidence in the number of foreign players that are involved in college soccer. And U.S. soccer doesn't say, like, we need to get more Americans into college soccer. Because if you go look at the last couple of College Cup champions and you think about the history of college soccer recently, it's a lot of that. It's a lot of recruiting foreign players to come in, and they get an education and the team gets to win on the field. And, is that a problem? I think is in the eye of the beholder, Rob, but certainly you could argue that U.S. soccer has an interest in making college soccer more attractive to American players, because there will be players who develop late, or players who don't want to go through the traditional pro path. And as you said, part of this is to connect college soccer to a pro path, if that's a thing for a player, in a way that has kind of fallen off in recent years.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff in this. And amongst the recommendations, one of the things that stood out was one of the notes that they were saying that overaged player usage should be scrutinized, but international players of the younger ages should still be welcomed and utilized. So I thought that was an interesting, tactful way to approach that, because I know some people go way off to one side, like this college soccer should only be for American players, and it's, internationals are stymieing it. But I think that's a fair compromise to still be welcoming the international players. But the age gap, like having a 19-year-old American lose his spot because a 26-year-old who's already gone through a professional gamut, and then like as a last or a down the totem pole option has like, okay, I'll go over and play college soccer. So they do address that. I did see a question in the chat asking, this is men's or women's. They did cover both men's and women's in this white paper. We've been talking so far about the men's. On the women's side, they didn't quite have as much fleshed out. One of like the bigger additions was knowing they acknowledge that change is needed. They recommend a stretching out of the fall league, and then maybe some of the elite teams play an additional spring season, but not quite as fleshed out on the women's side at this point.
There's a story by the aforementioned Henry Bushnell over The Athletic on this report that actually says that there is some significant pushback from within the women's soccer, college soccer community. So I do think that you can't. It's not going to be one size fits all. It's not going to be one solution works for everybody. So yes, the women's game is a little bit in a different place than the men's game when it comes to college soccer, right? Again, that's professionalization, that's academies scooping up a lot of players who might have gone to college in the past. It's obviously the international influence on men's college soccer, as you described. So I don't think that they're quite there yet with the women's game. But then, as I was saying, like there is an amount of pushback that they have to consider. You can't just do something unilaterally. And again, none of this is going to happen unless the NCAA and U.S. Soccer come to the table and figure out, whether or not this is something that actually the NCAA wants to enact.
And hopefully that there was some conversation between this board and the power brokers and NCAA, that they have some sort of a commonality to where they'd even be receptive to this as all, or if they're thinking that this is just outside intervention that they don't want, because hopefully that there is some sort of a bridging of the gap there, because it's good to see that the federation is acknowledging that college soccer isn't being utilized to its fullest at all. Because I think that's pretty clear to see. The other bullet points we talked about, the major bullet points of this is the calendar change, the regionalization option, but the other there's quite a bit of other stuff, but basically spells out trying to clarify the path between college and the pro leagues, as well as the U.S. Federation suggesting that they could use their corporate power, their social media reach to kind of formalize data tracking and publicity and corporate tie-ins to the college world.
That is obviously the carrot here for the NCAA is, here's a non-revenue sport that needs an overhaul pretty clearly, that is negatively impacted by a number of different pressures that are coming to bear on it. We even imagine a world in which college soccer teams are basically separate in an entity situation, a sense, from their colleges, and then they essentially become clubs. Now the players could still go to college, and maybe you find some creative way to fund their educations. I don't know how that would work necessarily, because I'm not an expert on NCAA clearinghouse stuff and all of that, and the scholarship situation. But we imagine that because it might allow for a little bit more flexibility for these college soccer teams if they are not directly tied in under the umbrella of the university or the college itself. But this is not that. This is something as kind of an in between those things. And yeah, if U.S. Soccer can help find a way to better financially support college soccer, that's the carrot that maybe gets the NCAA to the table and say, okay, fine, let's maybe do your stuff, because otherwise, if we don't do anything, it's not going to get any better.
Yeah, we'll see how this goes. I can't recall when the response is due, but I think it was by the end of the year, NCAA get a reply, but we'll have to look into that a little farther. But there was some sort of a date of we expect a reply from the NCAA on, what their response is to this at some point I think within the year. Because some of these recommendations are, they use a lot of words like haste and expedience, and they want to start applying these things around 2026.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if this happens, it seems like it could move rather quickly. But
let me just throw out a couple of other things that I think are worth mentioning, and
Sure.
these are related to a little bit to what we talked about already with professional players and things like that. But this is eligibility questions, because traditionally in college sports, if you ever go pro, you are ineligible to be a college athlete at that point. You are now you lose your amateur status. Now, again, with NIL and payments to players, things are a little bit murkier. But in the report, U.S. Soccer suggests that the NCAA, that college soccer take a look at eligibility, because if a player say signs a professional contract at 17 or goes through a professional pathway and would usually be denied the opportunity to play college soccer, but doesn't find that pathway to their liking, or it stalls, or they still want to play, why wouldn't you allow them to go play college soccer? Now, maybe you need some, you need to have some mechanism for sort of restoring their quote unquote NCAA eligibility, but that's what they're suggesting. Allowing players who have signed or under rights agreements with professional teams to pursue college competition, with the pro teams that they're attached to potentially funding some or all of their scholarship. Right. So if the player's like, well, this isn't working out for me in this academy, in this club, or I signed a contract at 17 to go pro, but I don't like what's happening for me, I want to go to college and play soccer, then maybe the club can help subsidize the scholarship, and then that allows the player to go play college soccer. But there's no issue with the eligibility. A second chance pathway for players to enroll and compete in college after previously starting a professional career that is stalled. Again, I mentioned that. Expanding opportunities for college players to train with professional teams outside the academic calendar. So this is always that thing, like, if you play with a pro, you lose your eligibility. Like, this has happened before, when a kid who's in college goes and joins a team for a summer or something and ends up playing with a professional, and now there's a whole question of about their eligibility. It's ridiculous. It's all antiquated. It shouldn't apply. It should never apply anyway. It certainly shouldn't apply now. So if a player wants to go and join a quote unquote pro team for the summer, or train with them, not play on the field, maybe not become a professional, that would be beyond the eligibility requirements for that pro team. But if he wants to train, maybe the club says, we're going to basically trial you for 2 months in the summer when you're between semesters. Why wouldn't you want that to be a thing?
Yeah, that just speaks to a larger part of like making it easier for a domestic player to become a professional. Like, why add let's remove the roadblocks. Like, that 17-year-old who's considering going pro has an easy way to say no, because, if I go and train or sign this contract, then my ability to get an education is toast through that. And that shouldn't be the case. There's so many players that, are on that edge of they could go pro in the right conditions, that never really consider it too much because their youth career guided them towards college. And, that was too big of a risk to undermine all that, to give it a shot, an outside shot of, I was invited to a camp. That doesn't, really guarantee anything.
Yeah. Exactly.
And, given it's basically like taking your shot at that your one shot or not. And if this is adopted, and if that amateur, college, and professional status, cobwebs are cleared away, that would help clarify that, amateur to pro player status. Because if you track what it actually takes for an American homegrown player to go from youth player to become a professional, there is next to no clarity. You got to, globe trot, hope you have a passport, or maybe, fingers crossed that you get a college scholarship. And then when you get there, you get playing time. And then the season's limited if you even get playing time. So It's very clouded and murky. And hopefully if these things are adopted in the right way, it will become easier for more Americans to take that shot at becoming professional players, because it is not an easy path as it stands.
One thing, and I'll bring in
Clear path.
Mike Thomas here, his comment, straight up, just make college teams clubs. I kind of mentioned that idea that's out there. U.S. soccer, I don't think, wanted to go to that extreme and suggest that be a fix to this, right? Just basically integrate college teams as de facto clubs, as clubs in the system of amateur soccer in America. That seems like maybe they were hesitant to do that because the NCAA, no matter whether it's soccer or lacrosse or football, gets a little possessive and provincial about these things. So I think that's probably where they went, why they didn't go in that direction. But yeah, the idea of, say, UVA playing in the U.S. Open Cup and getting a chance to play the Richmond Kickers or something is a pretty cool idea. How you enact it is a different question.
Yeah, it's a whole kettle of fish there. And from my perspective, I know I exist largely in the USL2 world, in the summer soccer world, and there was some angst of, if college soccer changes their calendar, what will happen to summer soccer? And with this new calendar, while extended, it does still leave that window. And the white paper actually name drops specifically USL2, that those opportunities will still exist. And there is still a gap in the calendar in April, May, June, and July when those seasons exist. So that doesn't completely eliminate that. I know some people were worried that, like, if college teams just become clubs, then what's the purpose of summer soccer? Yes. And then if they're going year round, is there even an opportunity for players to spend time with a summer soccer season? So some provisions in there for that. And that, you just saw on screen, college teams could club USL2. Definitely it would.
The problem with all of this is that there's going to be some unintentional casualties, right? There's going to be some things that die if we reform, these kind of, it becomes a question of what are you willing to sacrifice to reform a system? And obviously there are stakeholders here on every side who are going to say, well, my version is the most important version, or I don't kill off what I do to benefit something else. Right. And I don't envy the people who have to try to deal with those competing interests when it comes to that. Right. If you are collateral damage in all of this, you're going to be very angry. That's a fact.
Yeah, no doubt about that. It's like when I brought up high-speed trains to my cousin who's a pilot. He did not like hearing that alternative at all whatsoever. But also a different theory that I heard before this white paper came out that was interesting, that would change the game, is if the college club team theory, if they joined MLS Next Pro, and if you had like MLS Next Pro kids who were like kind of academy pro hopefuls versus, college route guys, that would be kind of an interesting mix of competition. But that's not what's in the paper, just a kind of a thought experiment there. But plenty to digest with this college white paper.